The sound of shattering trust. The sun had barely touched the horizon when Emily Reeves, a quiet and gentle 12-year-old girl with deep brown eyes like her father's, stepped out of the small-town library, hugging a hardcover book to her chest. She loved this place. It smelled like paper, peace, and old stories. It was her hideaway, the one spot where she could be herself without the eyes of the world pressing down because of her famous last name. Being Keanu Reeves' daughter came with more expectations than anyone truly understood. But none of that mattered to Emily. She didn't chase the spotlight. She chased stories, emotions, characters who felt just as lost and curious as she did. Her bike, a soft blue cruiser with a little woven basket at the front, leaned patiently against the iron rail near the sidewalk. She unchained it, swung her backpack across her shoulder, and started to pedal down the narrow street that led to their small vacation home nestled at the edge of the forest. Keanu had chosen that place on purpose, away from crowds, cameras, and chaos. He wanted Emily to grow up grounded, surrounded by trees and honesty, not marble floors and plastic smiles. But something about that day felt off. The rumble came first, a low, aggressive roar from engines that didn't belong on such a quiet street. Emily looked back, her small heart beating a little faster. Behind her, 3 bikers approached quickly, riding side by side, laughing loudly with no care for speed or safety. They weren't just passing through. They were aiming straight for her. She tried to move over. She tried to make space, but her hands were shaking. "Get out of the way, princess," one of them shouted, leaning too far, his tires cutting too close. The bike's handle twisted. The front wheel caught the edge of the curb. The world tilted sharply. Emily hit the pavement hard. Her arm landed first. A crack echoed in her ears louder than any scream she could manage. Her book spilled out, pages bending and tearing. Blood rushed down her elbow as the pain seared through her body like fire. And the bikers, those loud, careless strangers, just kept going. One of them glanced back, smirked, and then revved his engine louder, as if her pain was some kind of entertainment. A woman from a nearby coffee shop saw it happen. She rushed out, phone already in hand, and knelt beside Emily with a trembling voice. "Sweetheart, stay still. Help is coming." Emily couldn't speak. Tears blurred her vision, not from the pain, but from the betrayal of a world that just ran over kindness and left it in the street. When Keanu got the call, he was in the middle of repairing a wood panel in their kitchen. Something small, something ordinary. He liked fixing things. It grounded him. But nothing could have prepared him for the sound of the woman's voice on the phone. She didn't know who he was. She just said, "Your daughter's been hurt." It was a group of bikers. "She's okay now, but you should come." He didn't ask questions. He didn't even put his tools down properly. His hands moved on their own, grabbing keys, rushing out, heart thudding against his ribs like thunder. He found Emily in the hospital, her arm wrapped in a temporary splint, her face pale, eyes full of tears she was too brave to let fall. She looked at him the moment he walked in, and she didn't cry. She just whispered, "I tried to move over, Dad. I really did." That broke him. Keanu knelt beside her, took her uninjured hand gently in both of his, and kissed her forehead. "I know you did," he said quietly. "You didn't do anything wrong." But inside, a storm was building. He had always believed in staying calm. He had always believed in kindness above violence, patience above reaction. But now someone had hurt his daughter, his child, the one person he'd protect with everything he had. The sheriff told him later that day. "The bikers come through every few months. Rough crowd. No license plates. They wear masks. They treat this town like their playground." Keanu didn't speak. He simply nodded. And that night, as Emily slept with painkillers dulling her ache and a soft cast holding her broken arm, he sat in the dark by her bed, thinking. The world didn't need another angry man. It needed justice. It needed someone who could look into chaos and still choose something better. But he knew something else too. Sometimes kindness had to be fierce. The next day, he asked the sheriff for the security footage. Then he started. asking questions at every gas station, diner, and repair shop on the edge of town. Most people didn't know much, or they pretended not to, because fear was real. And those bikers weren't just rowdy, they were dangerous. But Keanu had something they didn't. He had purpose. And behind that calm voice and gentle smile was a fire that only lit when someone crossed the line. 3 days later, he found their Mark, a mechanic, half-drunk and loud-mouthed, bragging in the corner booth of a bar about the little rich girl who kissed the sidewalk. Keanu waited until the man stepped outside to smoke. And then he approached, not with fists, not with threats, just quiet truth. "I'm her father," Keanu said, his voice steady. "And I need to know who did it." The man stared at him. Maybe he didn't recognize him right away, or maybe he did, and didn't care. "You really think they'll talk to you?" the man said with a sneer. "They don't care who you are." "Maybe not," Keanu replied. "But I'm not here to scare them. I'm here to show them what happens when you hurt someone who only wanted to ride home safe." Something in his eyes must have changed, because the man backed up a little, the cigarette trembling in his fingers. And then he said the name. Ronnie. Keanu didn't know who Ronnie was. Not yet, but he would. And when he found him, it wouldn't be revenge. It would be something deeper. Because Keanu knew that what broke the world wasn't violence. It was people forgetting how to care. But what fixed it was someone choosing not to. And as the sky darkened over the forest once more, he whispered a silent promise to Emily, even though she couldn't hear him while she slept. "I won't let this go." The biker named Ronnie. The days that followed were heavy, like fog that never lifted, and Keanu felt the weight of every hour pressing down on his chest. The hospital had cleared Emily to return home, and though she was brave and soft-spoken as ever, her silence told him everything. She didn't complain, she didn't cry, but she also didn't ask to ride her bike or walk to the library anymore. She sat by the window now, tracing the outlines of trees with her eyes, and the book she had carried the day she was hit remained untouched on her nightstand, its pages still folded, spine bent. That pain of seeing her quietness turn into withdrawal cut deeper than anything else, because Keanu knew that when a child stopped trusting the world, something had broken that couldn't be mended with bandages. He spent every evening after she went to bed trying to piece together the path to the man called Ronnie. The town didn't want to talk, and most people who had once claimed to be helpful now avoided eye contact. But Keanu wasn't angry at them. He understood fear. It was easy to look away when trouble wasn't knocking on your own door. Still, he couldn't walk away. Not this time. The man had a name now. Ronnie. And that meant there was a thread to pull. Keanu had learned long ago that every story, no matter how dark, had a beginning, and every villain believed they were justified. He just needed to follow that thread until it unraveled everything. On the fourth evening, just before dusk, he stopped by a rundown service station tucked beside a long stretch of road that led out to the mountain trails. The place smelled like grease and rust, and the only light came from a flickering neon sign that said "Open," even though no one was inside. Or so it seemed. As Keanu stepped in, his boots scuffed against the cracked floor tiles, and a voice came from behind the stacks of tires. "We don't do celebrity vehicles. No photos, no autographs." Keanu didn't smile. He walked toward the sound, calm but firm. "I'm not here for attention. I'm looking for a man. Ronnie." There was silence. Then the man stepped out, lean, with a gray-streaked beard and eyes that had seen too many fights. His name tag said Kurt. He looked Keanu over, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "You must be the girl's father," Kurt said after a pause. "I heard about what happened. Then you understand why I'm here." "What I understand," Kurt replied, wiping his hands with a dirty rag, "is that Ronnie ain't the type to talk. And even if he did, it wouldn't matter. He's not scared of jail. He's scared of nothing. And if you go looking for him, you'll just end up with more hurt than you came in with." Keanu didn't flinch. "I'm not here to threaten him. I'm not here to fight. I just want him to look me in the eye and explain why my daughter had to suffer so he could feel powerful. Kurt studied him for a long while. Maybe he saw something behind Keanu's calm expression. Not rage, not pride, just purpose. And something about that moved him. He stays near Deadwood Trail, Kurt finally said, his voice low. You follow the old quarry road until you see the broken fence. There's a cabin behind the trees. That's where they gather. Thank you. Just don't go alone, Kurt added. They don't like outsiders, and they sure won't like you. Keanu didn't answer. He turned, walked back to his truck, and started driving. The night air grew colder the closer he got to the foothills, and the trees that lined the road thickened like shadows trying to hide something. He passed the quarry, the silence around it unsettling, and then saw the broken fence Kurt had mentioned. He turned off the headlights and drove slowly until the dirt path narrowed and the cabin came into view. Motorcycles. 6 of them, all lined up like soldiers. The cabin was dimly lit from within, and the sound of low laughter drifted out through the cracked window. It was the kind of place where rules were forgotten, and consequences were left outside. Keanu parked quietly, took a deep breath and walked straight toward the porch. His heart beat slower than it should have. He wasn't afraid. But he knew what kind of danger waited beyond that door. When he knocked, the laughter stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened. The man who stood there was younger than Keanu expected, maybe late 20s, with tattoos crawling up his neck and a scar across his jaw. His eyes were wild, like someone who had grown used to chaos. He didn't speak. He just stared. I'm looking for Ronnie, Keanu said plainly. The man smiled without warmth. Who's asking? The father of the girl he knocked off her bike. That smile vanished. Silence grew thick between them. You got guts, the man muttered. Come in then. Let's see what Ronnie has to say. The cabin was filled with smoke, the kind that clung to your clothes and made your eyes burn. 3 more men sat around a poker table, beer bottles scattered across it. Ronnie sat in the middle, broad shoulders, sharp jaw, a laugh that died the moment Keanu stepped into the room. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask twice. He looked straight at Ronnie and said, You hit a child. You didn't stop. You didn't care. You don't know her name, but you broke her arm and a piece of her world. Ronnie stood up slowly. You came all the way here to cry about your kid's little scrape? I came here because she hasn't smiled in 4 days, Keanu said, his voice low but clear. She wakes up from nightmares and won't ride her bike anymore. I came here because you made her afraid, and I want you to see what you did. I want you to face it. Ronnie scoffed. So what, you want an apology? I want you to understand the damage you caused, Keanu replied. And maybe just once I want you to realize that pain doesn't go away just because you ride fast enough. Ronnie's face twitched. Maybe no one had ever spoken to him like that before. Not without shouting, not without fear. The room went quiet. Then without warning, one of the bikers stood and threw a bottle at the wall. We don't answer to guys like you. But before the others could react, Ronnie raised his hand. Enough. He stepped closer to Keanu, looked him in the eyes and said something no one in that room expected. She was just a kid? Keanu nodded. Her name is Emily. Ronnie looked away, jaw tight. For the first time, he seemed human, not a monster, just a man trying to hide from his reflection. I didn't mean to hurt her, he mumbled. We were being stupid. She scared me, swerved, and you scared her first, Keanu said sharply, and then you kept going. The silence that followed felt longer than it was. Finally, Ronnie walked to the door, opened it, and said, You should leave. Keanu didn't move. Ronnie looked back and added, You want me to fix it? Tell me how. Keanu stared at him, and for the first time he saw a crack in the wall, a hesitation, maybe even regret. But that wasn't enough. Come with me, Keanu said. Where? To the hospital. You're going to tell her what you just told me. Ronnie laughed bitterly. You're dreaming, man. She doesn't want to see me. She doesn't know what she needs right now, Keanu replied. But what she deserves is truth, not excuses, not silence. And then, as the wind rustled through the trees and the cabin door swung gently behind him, Ronnie didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. Keanu turned and walked back to his truck. Ronnie stood on the porch watching, cigarette flickering in his fingers, and something in his posture had changed. He didn't know it yet. But by morning he would show up. Not because he was ready to face his mistake, but because deep down, something, Keanu said, had landed in the place where guilt lives. And that was enough. For now. The apology that shook the town morning came with a strange stillness, as if the whole town held its breath. Keanu Reeves stood by the kitchen window, watching the mist curl through the trees like a whisper from the earth itself. He hadn't slept. Not really. He had sat beside Emily's bed most of the night, gently adjusting her blanket each time. She stirred. She didn't say much anymore, and when she did, her words were wrapped in caution, like she didn't trust them to protect her the way they once had. That innocence, the soft, unshaken trust of childhood, had cracked when that biker didn't stop, when he looked back and kept going as if her body on the street meant nothing. And now Keanu waited for a man named Ronnie to prove the world could still be held accountable. He didn't expect the knock on the door. Not so early, not so soon. But when it came, 3 firm knocks followed by silence, Keanu opened it without hesitation. And there, Ronnie stood, not dressed like a biker. Not in leather, not in boots or chains. He wore a simple shirt, dark jeans, and something unfamiliar on his face. Uncertainty. Maybe even shame. He didn't look up at first. He stared at the wooden porch like it could shield him from the weight of his own actions. "You're here," Keanu said, his voice neutral. "I didn't sleep," Ronnie replied, eyes still on the ground. "What you said, it stuck." "Good," Keanu answered. "She's awake, but I'll ask her if she wants to see you." Ronnie nodded slowly, but his hands fidgeted in his pockets like someone bracing for rejection. Keanu stepped inside, walked quietly to Emily's room, and knocked gently on her door. When he opened it, he saw her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window again. Sunlight touched her cheeks, but there was no warmth in her eyes. He said softly. "There's someone here. He says he wants to talk. It's up to you." She didn't turn right away. Her fingers ran over the edge of her cast, tracing the signatures her friends had left during their short visit. She was quiet for a moment. Then, without speaking, she nodded. Keanu returned to the door. "You can come in," he told Ronnie. As Ronnie stepped into the house, the change in his demeanor was almost startling. Gone was the man who had smirked in the shadows of a smoky cabin. Gone was the loud engine, the arrogance. In its place stood a man disarmed by the realization that he had left a mark not just on a child's skin, but on her spirit. He entered the room slowly. Keanu stayed at the doorway but didn't interrupt. This wasn't his moment. This belonged to them. Ronnie stood in front of Emily, but not too close. He didn't sit. He didn't kneel. He just looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt like a child again, ashamed, exposed, and completely unsure of how to make it right. "I'm Ronnie," he said, his voice low. "I'm the one who hurt you." Emily didn't blink. She looked straight at him, her face unreadable. "I didn't stop," Ronnie continued, the words sticking in his throat. "I thought I was tough. I thought it was just a scare. Not real. But it was real. I saw you fall. I saw the way your arm bent, and I kept going, and I've hated myself every hour since." She still didn't speak, but her fingers curled a little tighter around the blanket beside her. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Ronnie said. "I wouldn't if I were you. But I had to come. I had to see what I did. I had to tell you that I'm sorry, not just because you're hurt, but because you were brave. You tried to move. You were careful. And I was reckless. I let the noise in my head drown out what mattered." There was a long silence, so long that even the trees outside seemed to hush. Finally, Emily's voice came, soft, unsure, but clear. "Why didn't you stop?" Ronnie swallowed hard. "Because I thought I was untouchable. Because I was afraid of what I saw when you fell. Afraid that if I stopped, I'd have to see what kind of person I really was. Tears pricked the edge of Emily's eyes. Not because she was sad, but because someone had finally admitted what no one else dared to say. It hurt, she said, voice trembling. Not just my arm. It hurt that you didn't care. Ronnie nodded, his own eyes glassy. I care now. I care more. Then you know. And if there's anything I can do to make it right, I'll do it. You can't fix it, she whispered, but you can make sure it never happens again. Ronnie stood very still, and then he did something no one expected. He pulled a folded slip of paper from his pocket and handed it to Keanu, who stepped inside to take it. Then, without another word, Ronnie turned and left. Keanu looked down at the paper. It was a signed statement, a confession of guilt, notarized by a local attorney. Attached to it was a list of the other bikers' names and where they usually met. It wasn't just an apology. It was a surrender. That night, as Keanu sat beside Emily again, she leaned her head against his shoulder. The silence between them was softer now, not broken, just quiet. Healing. Do you think he meant it? She asked. Keanu paused before answering. I think he didn't know how to mean it until he met you. And now, I think he'll never forget you. But the story wasn't over. The town had seen what happened. Rumors spread. And now the other bikers were watching. Not just Ronnie's actions, but Keanu's too, because the man they thought would come in fists first had done something far more dangerous. He had made them feel, and when men like that feel something for the first time, they either change or they fight back harder. What no one expected was how far they were willing to go to silence Ronnie, and what Keanu would have to do next. Silence has a price. The days after Ronnie's apology were different. Not calmer, not better, just different. A shift in the air, like the sky itself was watching. Emily began to heal slowly, not just physically, but emotionally. Her laughter was still missing, but she started reading again, fingers turning the pages one by one as if each chapter could mend a little more of what had been broken. Keanu watched her from the hallway sometimes, holding his breath like any wrong movement might chase away the fragile light returning to her world. He didn't push her to talk. He didn't ask how she felt. He just made sure he was there, close enough to be her anchor if the waves came back. And somehow, that was enough. But far beyond their home, deep in the wooded outskirts of the town, something darker was brewing. Ronnie's name had started to float in places it didn't belong, in whispered conversations behind locked doors, in angry voices over cheap beer and burning rubber. The other bikers had found out. Not just about the visit. Not just about the apology, but about the confession, and it didn't sit well with them. Ronnie had broken the one rule they lived by. Loyalty over everything. No matter what, you never turned on your own. No matter who got hurt, you stayed silent. And now, because he couldn't live with what he'd done to a little girl, he had betrayed them all. He had chosen guilt over pride, conscience over code, and in their world, that made him a target. They came for him at night. He had been staying in a cheap motel just outside of town, keeping his distance from everyone, trying to figure out who he was now that he had stripped away the mask. The television played softly in the background when the knock came. A soft one. Polite, like a friend might do. But Ronnie wasn't a fool. Not anymore. He grabbed the baseball bat he had been keeping beside the door and peered through the peephole. Nothing. He opened it anyway. Too slow. The first punch knocked him off his feet. The second came before he could even scream. 3 men, all masked, all fast. One of them grabbed the signed confession off the table and held it up like a trophy. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. The message was clear. Ronnie had crossed a line, and now they were going to erase him. But they didn't kill him. They left him bruised, bloodied, and broken, but breathing, barely. And before they vanished into the night, they spray-painted something on the wall behind. Him. 2 words that carried a warning. Stay down. When Keanu got the call, he was in the middle of fixing Emily's favorite night lamp. Her bulb had gone out again and he wanted her to have soft light to sleep under. But the moment he answered and heard the words, "Ronnie was attacked," everything inside him shifted. He told Emily he had to step out, just for a little while. She looked at him with a quiet knowing. She didn't ask why. She just nodded. Keanu drove fast, not recklessly, but with purpose. His mind replayed every word Ronnie had said, every ounce of regret he had shown. And he knew. This wasn't just punishment. It was a warning, a threat to silence. Not just one man, but the idea that someone could change, that someone could break the cycle. Ronnie lay in a hospital bed, his face swollen, ribs bandaged. His eyes barely opened when Keanu stepped in, but he smiled through the pain. "Guess they didn't like my apology," he joked weakly. Keanu didn't smile. "This isn't over." "I know," Ronnie said. "They took the paper, the confession, all of it." "We don't need the paper," Keanu replied. "We have the truth." But Ronnie shook his head. "They'll keep coming. And not just for me. For anyone who stands up. This isn't just about me and Emily anymore. This is about control. They think fear keeps this town in line." Keanu's jaw tightened. "Then we remind them what courage looks like." Ronnie looked up, startled. "You're going to fight them?" "Not with fists," Keanu said. "With light, with truth, with people." And that night, Keanu did something no one expected. He called a town meeting. He used his name not for fame, but as a shield. He knew people might show up if he invited them. Not because they wanted to help, but because they wanted to see what Keanu Reeves had to say. And that was enough. He rented the old community hall, placed a single sign outside that read, "We need to talk," and waited. At first, only a few came. Parents, a librarian, a local pastor, a couple of teachers. Then more arrived. Business owners, teenagers, even a few faces that had once turned away. Keanu stood before them, not on a stage, not behind a podium, just standing, like one of them. "Many of you know what happened to my daughter," he began. "What you might not know is that the man who hurt her came to apologize, not because I forced him, not because of cameras or pressure, but because he looked in the mirror and hated what he saw. People listened. He confessed," Keanu continued, "and because he did the right thing, he was beaten, nearly killed, because some people believe fear should rule this town. That silence is safer than truth. But I disagree." He stepped forward, voice steady. "I believe we are stronger when we face the pain. I believe our children deserve streets where they can ride without fear. I believe in forgiveness, but I also believe in consequences. And if those bikers want to keep this town scared, then they'll have to face something they're not ready for. Us." A murmur passed through the room. Eyes that had been filled with doubt began to light with something else. Resolve. "This isn't about revenge," Keanu said. "This is about reclaiming the soul of a town that forgot how to protect its most vulnerable." Someone stood, then another, and another. Voices began to rise, not in anger, but in unity. They spoke of fear, of past encounters, of long-held silence. But now they were ready to speak, ready to act. Keanu didn't need to lead them. He just needed to remind them they could stand. But as the meeting ended and people spilled into the night with hearts stirred and eyes open, a motorcycle passed by the hall slowly. One rider. No helmet. Just eyes fixed on Keanu. And then it sped away. A reminder. They were watching, waiting, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. The trap beneath the silence. The morning after the town hall felt like a turning point. Like the fog that had clung to the sidewalks for so long was finally starting to lift. There was something in the way the neighbors looked at each other now, like they'd remembered they were part of something bigger than fear. Shop owners swept their porches a little earlier. The librarian placed a display of children's books about bravery at the front of the reading room. Even the teenagers, usually glued to their phones or skateboards, started walking in small groups, silent, but watchful. Change had not arrived with thunder. It had crept in like dawn, quiet and steady, And it started with a girl in a cast and a man who refused to let the darkness go unchecked. Keanu noticed these changes, but he didn't let himself believe the danger was gone. Behind every warm smile and brave act, there was still the truth. Those bikers weren't finished. Not after what happened to Ronnie. Not after that confession nearly cracked their power apart. And especially not after the town gathered and said, even without shouting, that enough was enough. He could feel it in the way the wind shifted at night, the way the birds would suddenly scatter like they knew something was coming. And he was right. 3 days later, the sheriff came knocking. He was a big man with tired eyes, someone who'd spent too long enforcing laws that people had long stopped respecting. He wasn't corrupt, but he had grown quiet. Too many threats, too few deputies, too many times when looking away felt easier than starting a war he couldn't win. "They left something on your porch," the sheriff said, his face grim. "You should see it." Keanu stepped out, heart tight. There, resting on the porch railing like a cruel offering, was Emily's bike. Not just her bike, the bike. The one she had ridden from the library that day. The one the police said they couldn't find. It had vanished after the accident. Everyone assumed it had been stolen or broken. But now it was back. Except it wasn't the same. The basket was crushed. The frame twisted. But the worst part was the message etched into the handlebars. Deep scratches, carved with a knife, spelling, 4 words that made Keanu's hands curl into fists. "Next time we won't miss." He picked it up carefully, his jaw tight. The sheriff watched him, eyes heavy with helplessness. "They want to provoke you," the sheriff said. "They want you to come to them, to lose control. And if you do, they'll win." Keanu didn't answer right away. He stared at the bike, then at the trees beyond, then back toward the house where Emily still slept. "What if we set a trap?" Keanu asked quietly. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "You're not a cop, Reeves." "I don't need to be," he said. "I just need to be a father who's had enough." That afternoon they put the plan together. Not in a rush. Not with vengeance, but with careful precision. They had only one chance to do it right. Keanu knew the bikers would escalate. They already had, and if they wanted to finish what they started, they would come again. This time he would be ready. The plan was simple. Keanu would stage a public outing with Emily. Something small. Something predictable. The park just outside town. The place where families fed ducks and teenagers played basketball. They would make sure word spread, casually, just enough to reach the ears they wanted. They would let the bikers think Keanu had let his guard down, and they would wait. But what Keanu didn't tell the sheriff, what he didn't tell anyone, was that he knew something deeper, something he hadn't spoken aloud because it was too painful. This wasn't just about power anymore. This had become personal. He had recognized the eyes of the biker who rode past the hall that night, not just from the hospital, not just from the cabin, but from years ago, on the set of a small film where he had done motorcycle stunts. The man's name was Decker, a former stuntman, and someone who had once accused Keanu of getting him blacklisted after a dangerous fall on set. Keanu had nothing to do with it, but the bitterness in Decker's voice when he confronted him backstage years ago was unforgettable. "You ruined me," Decker had spat. Keanu had walked away. Now he realized he had walked away from a man who had never stopped burning inside. This wasn't just gang violence, it was revenge, masked as chaos, and Keanu knew. Decker wouldn't stop until he felt even. The day of the trap arrived. The park was unusually full for a weekday. Maybe people came because they felt the shift in the air. Maybe because they knew something important was happening. Emily wore a soft blue sweater and her new arm cast, a brighter color than the last. She was nervous, but she trusted her father, and that trust, even shaken, gave her strength. Keanu stayed close. They walked slowly, talking about books and dreams and things that had nothing to do with pain. It wasn't for show. It was real. It was the kind of moment every parent treasures, the quiet in between when nothing hurts and everything just is. The sheriff and 2 deputies circled the area in plain clothes. Cameras were hidden. Exits watched. The plan was clear. If the bikers made a move, they'd be caught. Fast. But no one expected what happened next. A food cart near the path exploded. Not a bomb. Not fire. Just a loud, deafening blast of compressed air and smoke, enough to scatter people, to confuse the senses. Keanu turned instantly, shielding Emily. From the smoke, 3 bikers emerged, masks down, boots heavy on the pavement. One of them, Decker, stepped forward, holding something sharp. Not a gun, not a blade, a tire iron. "You should have stayed quiet," he growled. "You should have stayed human," Keanu replied. Before the deputies could move, Decker swung. But Keanu was faster. He caught the iron midair, his grip solid, his eyes locked with the man who had haunted his daughter's dreams. They struggled. Muscle against muscle. History against truth. Then Keanu twisted, and the iron dropped. The other, 2 bikers rushed in, but so did the deputies. Chaos unfolded. People screamed. Children were pulled back. But within seconds, it was over. The bikers were pinned, Decker was handcuffed, and the trap had worked. Emily stood frozen, her eyes wide. Not with fear this time, but something else. Clarity. She had seen her father stand between her and the past. She had seen fear come for them and lose. And in that moment, the smallest, most powerful thing happened. She smiled. Not a big one. Not the kind that fills a room, but soft, real, brave. Keanu saw it, and in that smile he found something even deeper than justice. He found hope. The long road to peace, the days that followed the park incident, didn't feel like a celebration. They felt like deep breaths after too long underwater. The town had witnessed something powerful. Not just a crime, not just a takedown, but a moment where silence was shattered and courage stood tall in its place. Decker and the 2 other bikers were arrested on multiple charges, including assault, conspiracy, and attempted harm of a minor. More names surfaced after that. More faces once hidden behind helmets now exposed through statements and footage. Ronnie, still healing but steady, testified. Not to punish, but to cleanse. The courtroom didn't echo with vengeance. It echoed with truth. And that, in itself, was rare. Emily's life slowly returned to something familiar, though never quite the same. She was changed, not in a way that dimmed her, but in a way that sharpened her view of the world. She walked differently now, more aware, more thoughtful. She still had scars on her arm, but she wore them like a reminder that pain was real. Yes, but survival was stronger. Her friends at school treated her with more respect. Not pity, not distance, just understanding. And sometimes, that's all a person needs to feel human again. Keanu spent most of those days close to her, not hovering, not overprotective, just present. He helped her rebuild her bike, not the same one. They started fresh, new frame, new basket, new colors. They worked in the backyard side by side as birds fluttered through the trees and the wind whispered like it knew what had happened. When it was finished, Emily stepped back and smiled at the light blue paint and soft white grips. It wasn't just a bike. It was a declaration that she was no longer afraid to move forward. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the trees and painted the sky in streaks of amber and violet, Ronnie came to visit. He stood at the gate awkwardly, a paper bag in one hand and a cast still visible on his ribs. Keanu greeted him without tension. "You look better," Keanu said. "I feel worse," Ronnie replied with a half smile. "But I brought something." From the bag, he pulled out a book. It was the same title Emily had dropped on the day of the accident, its corner still bent, cover faded from where it had hit the pavement. But it was no longer damaged. Ronnie had tracked down a rare hardback copy, signed by the author, with a note inside that read, "For Emily, the bravest story I know." Keanu took the book and nodded. "She'll appreciate this." "I know it won't fix things," Ronnie said. "But it felt right. Sometimes," Keanu said slowly. "Doing the right thing isn't about fixing anything. It's about making sure the wound doesn't go unnoticed." Ronnie left shortly after that, but not without glancing back at the house. Something in him had changed. He would always carry the guilt. But guilt had become a compass now. Not a weight, but a guide. Emily opened the book that night, read the author's note, and ran her fingers across the signature. Then she whispered, "I'm not scared anymore." And Keanu, sitting across the room with a cup of tea, simply nodded. But just as the town began to settle, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. No return address, just a plain white envelope, slipped under their front door one morning. Inside, a single sheet of paper typed. It read, "We are watching. You may have taken a few pawns, but the board is bigger than you think." Keanu stared at it for a long time. Not in fear, not in panic, just reflection. He knew what it meant. Decker wasn't acting alone. There were others. Maybe not here, maybe not now, but this wasn't over. He burned the letter in the fireplace that night, watching it curl into black ash. Then he turned to Emily and asked, "How would you like to learn self-defense?" She looked up, surprised, then curious, then determined. "I'd love that," she said. And so began a new chapter. Keanu trained her not to fight, but to stand, to breathe in the face of fear, to know that no matter what shadows came back to the edge of their lives, they would not be swallowed again. She learned quickly, not because she was trying to become someone else, but because she was reclaiming who she had always been. The sheriff organized community patrols. The town installed more lights, more security. But the greatest change wasn't in equipment. It was in spirit. People greeted each other now with more sincerity. They walked slower, noticed more. They remembered what had happened. And they didn't turn away. One afternoon, as Keanu and Emily rode their bikes side by side down the same road where it all began, she turned to him and said, "I think the road looks different now." "How so?" he asked. "It's still the same cracks and trees," she said. "But I don't see it as the place I got hurt. I see it as the place I got stronger." Keanu looked at her, pride in his chest like firelight. "You did get stronger," he said, "and I think you helped all of us do the same." A breeze passed through the trees then. Not loud, just soft, gentle, like a thank you. The past didn't disappear. The pain didn't erase itself, but neither did the resilience. And in that quiet truth, father and daughter rode on, knowing that healing was never a finish line. It was a choice, a daily one. And every time they chose it, the road ahead became just a little brighter.